Welcome to another edition of our video podcast developed to help parents find ways and resources to support their children in achieving an education. Today, we have with us a very important person, Dr. Barbara Cruz, who is a professor in social studies in the College of Education at the University of South Florida. Dr. Cruz, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Now, let me begin by asking you, what do the social studies entail?
Well, for the most part, I think that people think of four main content areas. They think of history, geography, economics, and government and civics. But oftentimes it could also include other areas such as law studies, for example, psychology, sociology, anthropology, and maybe even area studies like, for example, Asian studies or Latin American studies.
Now, what, in your mind, what is the importance of social studies for the children's development, and how could social studies help children succeed not only in education but also in becoming good citizens?
Well, I think that's a great question, because I think lots of times parents and students, certainly, when they think of social studies, they think of a lot of memorization of boring dates and, state capitals and things like that. But really, when you think about it, social studies is everyday life. It's connecting school to everyday life. So one of the things that I would like to tell parents is that you need to reinforce those connections in as many different ways possible. For example, if you can connect the past to the present, as things are happening in the news, if you can make those connections so that students can see how what's happening today can relate to what happened in the past, that's certainly a really wonderful way to get them to start becoming involved, as citizens. I would also encourage parents, if at all possible, to think of ways to encourage and promote good study habits at home. Sometimes people have set homework hours, for example, or a set place in the home. If you have a home study or a home office, that's wonderful, but certainly not necessary. In my home, it's the kitchen table. And we have a little area of the kitchen that's set aside for homework. Keeping school supplies there at home, having a good dictionary, those kinds of things, those kinds of tools and resources that'll support the homework, exercises and assignments that students receive will go a long way.
So if I understand you correctly, social studies is not only, as you mentioned, the study of dates and capitals, but also an understanding of how societies work, your society work, how to become a good citizen, for example. Am I understanding you correctly?
You're exactly right. It is understanding how societies work, both past and present, and our role in society. So one of the things that we like to have students think about is the fact that information changes from time to time. And so the way that past events have been portrayed may be different tomorrow than our understanding of it today, for example. So we need to help students understand that information is fluid. We want them to think critically. We want them to remember that a lot of social studies issues are controversial in nature. So we want them to be sure to be able to differentiate between fact and opinion. And it's okay to develop an opinion on a particular topic or event, but to have that buttressed or supplemented with concrete background information.
Now, that's very interesting. How could, in your mind, a parent, for example, help children understand some of the social studies concept in a hands-on type of way?
Hands-on experiences are absolutely vital for students to develop a healthy understanding of the social studies. One of the things that I like to tell parents is to consider yourself a tourist in your own town. And that is, look up historical sites, look up museums, historical museum, art museums, those kinds of venues that you can take your children and help them to understand the world around them. If at all possible, it would be great if on some of your trips, either for business business or for pleasure, you take your child to another state, another town, another country. That is how you develop respect for diversity. That's how you develop a curiosity about the world around you that will then translate into classroom success.
Those are very interesting suggestions. Now, how would you address this very same concept with Latino or Latina parents? Like, for example, you mentioned the idea of visiting a different town, visiting a different country. Some of our parents are from different countries. So are you suggesting that they teach their children about the differences, for example, in terms of how government is organized in the United States as compared with their own country or home country? How would you suggest Latino parents to do this?
I think Latino parents have an incredible rich diversity in our backgrounds that we're able to then share with our children. For one, certainly you can do a kind of a comparison with the United States, but see, if you have a grandparent or a parent or an aunt or an uncle whose heritage is different from the mainstream United States, right off the bat, you can create a curiosity and an interest in a child by stressing those connections, that ancestry, that heritage. So if at all possible, if you go back to visit family members in Puerto Rico or in Argentina or Mexico, I think that's a great opportunity to get kids excited about other forms of culture and government and history, and then bring it back to the United States. I also would like Latino parents to think of themselves as excellent role models for their children. We have to remember that we are our children's first teacher. And in that regard, they are constantly watching us, watching what we do, listening to what we say, even when we think that they're not doing so. And so I would like for parents to think about the things that they can do to model good citizenship. For example, having your children watch you, look at you, read the newspaper, being interested in world events, in local events. Taking out every once in a while a map or an atlas to find a city. If you hear a reference in the news about Taiwan, bringing out an atlas and saying, where is Taiwan? Is that in the Western Hemisphere or is that in the Eastern Hemisphere? And working with your child to show them where Taiwan might be. And of course, voting. Every time that I go vote, I bring my children with me and bring them into the voting booth and even ask them to push the buttons, as need be. And even for Latino parents who are not United States citizens, still being involved in the politics of your local communities as well as your home countries are a wonderful way to get kids interested about social studies.
And reinforcing the idea of being a role model.
And reinforcing the idea of being a role model, exactly.
Now, you yourself are a good role model because you are a successful Latina. You are a professor at a Tier 1, what we call a university. What helped you become the successful Latina professional that you are?
Well, I think, certainly hard work, is an important consideration, but when I break that down into, smaller components, I think of three things in particular. I think that goal setting is very important. Having goals for yourself that are important to you to achieve, to meet. But then beyond that, to be organized in meeting those goals. So I take big goals and I break them down into smaller goals and chip away at them every chance that I get. And then that's the third important piece is the follow-through. Following through, making your actions concrete so that you can achieve those dreams and those aspirations that you set up for yourself.
Wonderful. Is there anything else that I should have asked you and I didn't, or anything else that you would like to add?
I can't think of anything other than to say that I would like for parents to remember that they are their children's first and most important teacher, and to encourage you to make connections between the home and the school so that both experiences are very positive for your child.
You heard it here. As Dr. Cruz reminded us, we are the first teachers of our children, and as Latino parents, we have a responsibility to be good models, and especially to model for them all the elements related to social studies so they themselves can be engaged in reviewing and learning those concepts and contents. Thank you very much. Appreciate your visiting with us.
Thank you for inviting me.